Guys, welcome on into Three Bold Takes. And in this video, we are going to predict the college football playoff quarterfinals. We're here. We made it through round one, and now we're here on to the quarterfinals where we get some bowl games instead of home games, which is so sad compared to the first round. It should be home games all the way till the semis at least, but that's a topic for another video. We're going to go first to the first game on the 31st at 6:30 between Miami and Ohio State. Looks like Ohio State's a 9.5 point favorite. Even now, it started that way, and it is still currently at 9.5 with the over under at 40.5. Chase, let's sling it over to you first.
Man, let's revisit the Miami Texas A&M game. I picked Texas A&M in that. I love their defense. I love their front seven. Really didn't have a lot of faith in Carson Beck. And honestly, that game wasn't a slugfest. It was just an ugly fest. From both offenses, they didn't really do a lot. Miami did do a lot, and then they pulled away late in that game, got the touchdown, and ended up winning against Texas A&M. Is it more of a fault? I think Miami took a hold of a good circumstance in the game, which helped pull them ahead when Texas A&M was just playing very poorly. I don't think Miami is a great team. I don't think they're going to be a great team. And I think this is where the Bucks should have stopped with Texas A&M. But I think Texas A&M was just caught up in the season that they were having and didn't finish out strongly like they should have. Um, and so now it's kind of a wash. Who cares about the season for Texas A&M? Ohio State, they got something to prove. What's the last game you played? The only loss on your schedule this season against Indiana. You're trying to move up the board again, trying to get back to playing them one more time, seeing if you can. Miami's not better than you. Not even close. Carson Beck has seen Ohio State, but man, like Miami has no I don't think they have any kind of opportunity to any choice of being here. I think Ohio State through and through should absolutely Willy Wonka them and just beat the brakes off of this team. I'm telling you, they like just beat the Sonic coins out of them. I hope that happens. It should. But I was wrong in the Texas A&M game. Again, I don't freaking know how with that Texas A&M defense, Marcel Reed. But should be a warm up game for Julian Sanders. But don't get me wrong, Ohio State this is because this is only the second season of the 12-team playoff, right? You got to look at these second games. Miami won the first game, right? So they're already oiled up, they're tuned up, they're ready to go. How does Ohio State respond with having all this time off? They got the bye. How do they look coming out? They're probably going to look pretty sloppy. I think they pull away and win by 10 points. But I think early on in the first half, it's going to look like, man, Miami's coming out swinging. But I think they're going to give them everything they got. All Buckeyes in this one, though.
Yeah, no, see, I want to talk on what Freddie said for a minute. If this was at Columbus, Ohio, Miami have absolutely no shot. It'd be frigid. Those guys from South Beach would be walking around like wishing they were anywhere other than Columbus, Ohio. They'd all be dressed like Chase, freezing. I don't get how Chase is freezing. Fire going on behind him, but he's still cold apparently. But yeah, no, I mean, look, as far as the actual game goes, I actually think it'll be closer than the 9.5. And here's my reason behind that. This is gonna be the best, I think, best true front four pass rush Ohio State's played all year. Now, I'm not gonna say it's necessarily the best pass rush they played because Indiana is legit. But as far as just true bring four and cover with seven, this is the most talented four-man pass rush they're gonna see all year because it's the best four-man pass rush in the country. Those edges in Miami are legit, and I think they're going to give Sayan some problems, right? When we picked Miami and A&M, I said that both teams were basically the same team, and whichever quarterback played the cleaner game would win the game. I was just wrong on who it would be. Okay. This week, though, there's only one thing I know in college football, and that's that the Ohio State defense is the best defense in college football. They're the only true elite unit on any team in the country, like full unit, like an entire side of the football that is elite is Ohio State's defense. Okay. I don't trust Carson Beck at all against Matt Patricia's defense. They're going to have him seeing cover three when they're running cover zero and seeing cover zero when they're running cover four. Like that man's going to be throwing so many picks, it's not even funny. However, I think Miami stays in the game because of their defense. I think they're going to limit Ohio State's offense. I have no reason to think that Ohio State's offense is going to play well because every time they've played a defense even remotely comparable to Miami's, they have struggled to score. They struggled to score on Indiana. They struggled to score early on Michigan until they pulled away in the second half. They struggled to score on Texas. Okay. I do think that trend continues. However, even in those games where they struggled to score, Julian Sand wasn't turning the ball over. And I think that'll be the difference in the game. Field position is going to favor Ohio State due to the lack of turnovers. I don't trust Beck at all in this major situation. I refuse to believe that Carson Beck plays 2 clean games in a row on this big of a stage. Now, it would be the most Carson Beck thing ever to play great against Ohio State, win the game, and then go play the worst game of his career against Georgia. But I don't think that's going to happen. So give me Ohio State to win the game. I'm going to call it, let's say 20-13.
Yeah, 9.5 points is a lot for a college football playoff game, and I understand it is Ohio State, and I understand the sentiment behind the reason why it's that way. But I'm in agreement with Quinn here. I think Miami covers the 9.5, and what a lot of people don't understand is in that game against Texas A&M, yes, Carson Beck did not have that great of a game, but he was efficient in the times that they threw the ball. And that was by design. I mean, it was 40-mile-per-hour winds. The goalposts were shaking back and forth. So it's hard to throw down the field when that's in play. Now they're going to be in the Cotton Bowl, 72 degrees inside, beautiful, perfect weather, no excuses. So I expect Miami to come out and try to sling the ball a little bit more. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I do believe, though, that I think Miami has an edge on both the offensive and defensive lines. Their offensive line is one of the best in the country. And a lot of people don't know that and or pay attention to that because it's Miami, right? And they're not putting up 300 rushing yards a game. Well, guys, an offensive line is not measured just upon rushing yards. It's everything combined. And that's what the misconception is a lot of times when you talk about good and bad O-lines, is can you run the ball? Well, yeah, they can run the ball, but they can also pass block as well. And Carson Beck can throw it for 400 yards. Will he in this one? No, he won't. But I think he's going to do enough to keep Miami in the game, and I think this is going to be a super close game, with Ohio State pulling it out in the end. But I'm in agreement with you, Quinn. I think it'll be a really, really good game, a very underrated game going in, because a lot of people has written off Miami and said this game's not even going to be close. Hey, if you look at Bowl Mania, 91% of America's picked Ohio State. So, hey, that tells me, and I'm sure the other 9%, this is either A, just like in March Madness, their upset bracket where they pick every single underdog, or B, Miami fans. Those are the only two that are actually picking Miami, and I'm going to fall in line with that and go Ohio State along with the rest of America. But I think it's going to be a good, tight game. And then moving on to the next game, actually, is well, I guess it's not really the next game, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. 3:00 game, the Rose Bowl, Alabama, Indiana. This is another game that's been talked about very heavily of recent days, simply because of the storylines between these two teams. Alabama's been the perennial powerhouse in college football, one of, if not, I would argue, the greatest program in the history of college football, versus a team in Indiana who just recently have enough wins to where they're not the losingest program in FBS Division I college football, or I guess Power 4 football, and that's Indiana. But they are 6.5-point favorite. If you told me 2 years ago or 3 years ago that Indiana would be a 7 or 6.5, 7-point favorite against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, I would have called you crazy. But here we are, and credit to Cignetti for doing that. But in this one, 3:00 over under 48.5. Looks like 82% of America is going with Indiana. Quinn, I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a reason 82% of America is going with Indiana. Indiana is a 13-0 football team in the best conference in America, and that's the Big Ten. And I know the SEC folks are going to get in the comment section after I said that and just go at me about how the Big Ten's not this, the Big Ten's not that. Look, man, I got the Alabama hat on my head, but let's call it spade a spade. They're back-to-back national champions looking to get their third. They've got 3 of the 8 teams left in the playoff. So does the SEC, but I mean, they're tied in that regard, except all 3 of their teams are favorites to win their games. All right. And then they're undefeated in bowl season right now, pending what happens with USC TCU while we're recording this. Okay. I mean, the Big Ten's running the show, and Indiana's undefeated amongst that conference. And they didn't play necessarily the slouches of the Big Ten either. They played Illinois, they played Iowa, they played Ohio, or not, yeah, they played Ohio State, they played Oregon. All right. So they didn't play USC or Michigan, but they played the rest of the top card of that conference. All right. Like, they're good. They're really good. This pass rush is good. Honestly, the game itself, though, and this is one thing I've been seeing a lot of, I don't quite understand the idea that this is just going to be some major blowout. Let me explain why. The big push I've seen for why this game's going to get out of hand and be a blowout is Alabama can't run the ball against this Indiana front. Alabama can't run the ball against the worst front in America. They don't try to run the ball. So the strength of your team being your run defense doesn't matter when you're playing Alabama. It's like, oh, we're going to make them one-dimensional. They are always one-dimensional. That's all they do. They play one-dimensional offense, and they've gotten to the quarterfinals of the playoffs doing it. They are the healthy. I was reading just the other day, they're the healthiest they've been since the Vanderbilt game back in September. So this is going to be a legitimate threat for Indiana. I expect the game to be somewhat close. The key to the game, to me, is going to ride on Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman Trophy winner. Surprise, surprise. Why do I say that? He's got an amazing stat line until you look at his performance. When you separate the games and look at the most talented groups he's played: Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. His stat line is what, like, I think it's 5 interceptions and 11 touchdowns, and 5 of those came against Illinois. So you take the Illinois game, set it to the side, that's a pretty human stat line against those better teams that he's playing. And he's just racked up crazy numbers against the bottom half of the Big Ten that they played against. At the end of the day, I'm going Indiana to win this football game. I like Indiana to win by 4. The reason I feel so strongly about an Indiana 4-point victory comes down to the fact that I don't think Indiana's going to turn the football over. You look at Alabama this season, every game they've won the turnover margin, they've won the game. But Indiana does not turn. That's been their strength. They're the most sound team in football all year. They're not going to get penalties. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're not going to turn the ball over. They're going to get like 3-4 yards cloud of dust, play sound technical football, and try to wear you out to the end of the game. I do expect Alabama to keep this highly competitive, though. I don't understand this conversation that's just going to be some kind of major blowout. But give me the Hoosiers to get it done and move on to the next round.
Yeah, this game's actually a lot of fun just because of like the all like weird nerdy factoids that are in this one. You know, you got the coach of Alabama who used to coach at Indiana. You got the coach at Indiana that used to coach at Alabama. January 1st, 1926 was the first ever win at the Rose Bowl for the Crimson Tide. That's 100 years later, and I believe this one, if I'm not mistaken, will be if they can win against Indiana, is the 1,000th win of program history. Just a lot of cool things for Alabama on the plate today, and just a lot of cool intertwinings between these two teams. But let's go back to the starting game for Alabama against oh my gosh, who am I missing? Oklahoma. Sorry. They played against Oklahoma. I came on and said, hey, it's just not going to happen. They turned the ball over the first time in Tuscaloosa, but also Batir just kind of did what he needed to with him. He was a dual threat guy that they couldn't really compete against. Again, they weren't fully healthy, like Quinn alluded to. They haven't been fully healthy most of the season. But the biggest thing Alabama's always had a problem with is dual threat quarterbacks. Take it back to Saban's days, man. Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Kyler Murray, Trevor Knight. You just got plenty of guys that have just come through that if they can run with the ball, if they're mobile and they can throw the ball any sort of way, that they're going to give Alabama's defenses problems. Was hoping that might stop with Kane Womack. Somehow the bend don't break defense, just it really bends and sometimes it does break. So I think with this, that's what you're looking for. I said it in that game, and I kind of told these guys was like, if they can beat Oklahoma, I really see Alabama in the national championship. Mainly because I think their defense is really good. In the secondary, I think they do a great job there of strapping down. Like I just mentioned, they're a very good bend don't break. They'll let you get to the red zone, but they're not always letting you get that touchdown. You're just not. You might slice through them like Swiss cheese for 70 yards, but goodness gracious, you hit that red zone, it's the buck stops there, and you're getting like maybe 3 yards and a field goal. So that's the thing. It's going to be a slugfest. I think it's going to be a lot like the Indiana Ohio State game. It's how sound do these teams play. Alabama, go look at their losses this year. Go look at how many turnovers they had in those losses this year. The Georgia game, I think they had two on their own side of the field, which led to Georgia scores. That's why it was so bad. You look at that box score, like you look like the Jimmy Butler meme, like, oh my gosh, what happened here? But it's only because Alabama shot themselves in the foot. If Ty Simpson plays a clean game, he's going to put 300 on you and probably 2 or 3 touchdowns, and then he's going to look like the #1 pick in the draft in April. But he can also look like the guy that's fumbling the ball around and can't get it together. I think Ty Simpson gets it done. He's got all his receivers healthy. I think you got to get Ryan Williams integrated early into the offense. That's been the big thing missing for them a little bit. He kind of got going in that Oklahoma game, but he wasn't there early on. Jeremy Bernard, Jam Miller's back, so he's going to be a problem out of the backfield, your best rusher. And then the defense is healthy. That is the big thing. The front four is healthy. There's going to be pressure there. LT Overton's back as well. And then your secondary, just like Xavier Brown is just a dog. I like Indiana. I've loved what they've done all season. I've actually doubted them a lot this season. Doubted them in the Ohio State game, but they've stepped up over and over and over again. And I think there's an opportunity to do so here. I really do. But I think Alabama pulls this one out like a 26-21 type thing.
Yeah, Chase, I like how you brought up the fact for Alabama, the 100-year thing, the 1000th game. Like those are really cool stats. And when the media asked Kirk Cignetti about Alabama and the opportunity to play them, I really thought that he would give some prideful, some snooty answer, but he didn't. And I was really hoping he would, because then that would be bulletin board material, but he didn't. He talked highly about Alabama, how good they are, the things that they do well, how it's going to be a challenge. And that was some Saban-esque things that came out of his mouth, which is not normal when you talk Kurt Cignetti. So a lot of praise for him. I think he's grown in this run. So Indiana is out their best pass rusher on the edge. He got hurt in the celebration of the Big Ten championship. He will not be in this game. That's going to hurt him. The rain forecast also is not looking too well for this game for both quarterbacks. It looks like it's actually going to rain some of the game, which is very rare at the Rose Bowl, which has to favor Indiana there because Alabama cannot run the ball and Indiana can. So that's going to be an issue. But I do like how healthy Alabama is finally, because you saw the scouting report. There was 3 guys on it, one of which is suspended indefinitely due to a crime that he committed, and then the other 2 are out with long-term injuries. So. And for those of you that don't know about the Georgia game, Alabama was out 8 or 9 starters and then 7 of those backups. So you were talking 3rd and 4th stringers getting to play in that game. So that's why that score was so bad. Also the turnovers, as you mentioned, Chase. I don't think Alabama's miraculously going to be able to find a run game. However, I do think Kane Womack found something on the defensive side. If you look at that Oklahoma game in the second half, this year Alabama is has blitzed the least of any team in the SEC at 15% of the time. In that Oklahoma game, they finally started calling blitzes. We got pressure on the edge, and all of a sudden you're talking 4 or 5 sacks in the second half. That's what's going to have to happen in this game. Is Alabama's going to have to be able to get after Mendoza, because the thing about it is he's not the fastest guy in the world. If you can pressure him, you will get him down. It's not like Mateer that will be able to do some circus spin move out of there and then miss a wide open ball 40 yards downfield. Like, that's not what's going to happen in this one. He's going to go down. But the thing about him, though, is he's smarter. So he's going to throw the ball away more. Therefore, the sack numbers may be less. If Bama wouldn't have played in the SEC title and opted out, this spread may have been 3.5 points. But because of that Georgia game and because of that horrific showing, now we're looking at a 6.5 point ball game. To be honest with you, Indiana this year reminds me of Oregon of last year. Undefeated, they make the Rose Bowl with all that time off, and then they get upset. I'm very curious to know how these teams that, number one, did not play in a conference championship game, who had an extra week off than normal, fare in this one. I think there's too many things external in this game. Give me Alabama to get it done. Would I be surprised if Indiana wins? No, of course not. They're favored. Duh.
Look,
So if they win, okay, that's fine. You're favored. But I do think that Bama's going to be able to get it done. Although I will say, shout out Indiana. They made the playoffs last year. They got steamrolled, and then they're back with a vengeance. And all of a sudden, they're the perennial number one team who deserves it. So shout out Signetti. Shout out Indiana. And I think it's interesting, too, that nobody really gives Alabama a shot to win this game, from what I've seen on television and on Twitter and everything. So that's interesting to take a look at, too.
let me ask you this. It's supposed to rain during the game. If we get rain the entirety of the Rose Bowl, what is Alabama's path to winning in that environment against an Indiana team that is a top 3 run defense and a top 15 run offense versus an team that's in the hundreds in both?
It's got to be quick passes. I mean, it's got to be bubble screens. You've got to get your guys the ball on the outside. We've got to get Ryan Williams the ball behind the line of scrimmage more so that he can do what he does best, and that's make people miss. Got to get that going. Bernard's really good at doing that too. And Cuevas, I think Cuevas is going to be the key in this one too, especially the little 3-4 yard poppers. And he's really good at breaking tackles too. So it's just going to have to be Alabama's offense, but shortened. And Ty Simpson's just going to have to be able to do it. That's all I can say.
Took the words out of my mouth.
I just don't trust that. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't I don't know.
I don't know either. But that's why the games are played, right? Because you never know what's going to happen.
Roll Tide.
Then we're going to move on to the Orange Bowl, and I just mentioned Oregon, so we're going to talk about them. Oregon, Texas Tech, Orange Bowl. Oregon is a 1.5 point favorite, over under at 52.5. 72% of America is going with Texas Tech in this one, as they do come in as the 4 seed. Oregon, obviously, the 5 seed. Chase, I want to hear from you first in this one.
I absolutely love this game because it feels like Halloween in January. This is probably the scariest matchup out of the quarterfinals. You got to remember the quarterfinals, these teams, the higher seed does not play. The lower seed already had their warm-up game, their tune-up game to get here. And Oregon had the tune-up game for ages. Got the worst of the group of 5 teams to play. Was smacking them at halftime, kind of pulled their starters in the middle of the third quarter. So they just had plenty of time. The score looks worse than it was, and JMU, I think, paraded their flag around. We put up the most points as a group of 5 in the playoff. Congrats. You're playing their 3rd and 4th stringers. Like, JMU, you're good. I don't think you deserve to be there by any means, so I'm not going to give you that praise. But this is the scariest one. Right now, looking at my Bowl Mania picks, and I'm looking at my click tab of Texas Tech. I watched Texas Tech in that BYU game, and they were kind of struggling a little bit, but the Mustache Bros started pulling it out. One of the linebackers, I think it was like Ben something. I forget his last name. My apologies. But brother had an interception with one hand and then had another one later in the game. Their defense is a monster. I just watched a little bit of Space Jam before we hopped on here, and it was like The Monstars took over those players. That's what I'm saying. Like that defense is just fun to watch. The front seven is nasty. You have a top 10 edge in the draft on their team and David Bailey. They're just nasty. Their offense isn't anything a spectacle. It's an above average offense that can move the ball, that can score, but the defense is the highlight. The defense just shuts you down. They get takeaways. That's the biggest thing. And sometimes they turn those takeaways into scores. That's the other big thing they did against BYU. They just cause havoc. And I think they're going to be able to do that a lot with Dante Moore. But this scares me the most. Oregon's offense probably needed a little oiling up before playing a team in the playoffs of stature. You got that against JMU, Texas Tech. This is again, I mentioned this with the Ohio State game. Is what do these higher seeds? It's only year two, the 12-team playoff. What do these higher seeds like? How do they respond to a couple weeks off and not being able to play? Are they going to be slow? I really wanted a pull for Oregon here. I think Oregon's going to upset. I'm going to stick with Texas Tech, though. I think Texas Tech ends up getting it done just because of the defense. But I think this is out of the quarterfinal games. I think this is the most highly likely upset game of any of them with Oregon winning. But I'm going to choose Texas Tech in this one.
Yeah, I'll start by saying Oregon winning is definitely not an upset. Oregon is the favorite in this game. As far as like where I'm riding on this pick, Chase hit everything nail on the head. First off, this game was so hard to pick. Out of all four of them, I had the most back and forth coming up to this one. He hit another thing I wanted to talk about really quick right off the bat. The dumbest take I've seen coming into this game is Oregon gave up 500 yards to James Madison and so many points to James Madison. Texas Tech's going to move all over them. No, they didn't. Oregon's third and fourth string defense gave up a bunch of yards and points to Madison when they didn't care anymore. I think the biggest X factor for this game, or first, let's start with this. The best unit in this game is Texas Tech's front seven. They're an A+ unit.
Nasty.
Their secondary's okay. Their front seven makes their secondary better than it is. Their offense is passable in the Big 12. They move the ball at an efficient rate. They don't make mistakes, and they benefit off of a lot of forced turnovers from that front seven.
Yep.
This is by far the most talented roster Texas Tech has played all year against Oregon. Like, it's not close. Their offense struggled mightily against BYU both times they played them. The reason they won those games by such a large margin was the turnovers forced. Now, on the plus side to Texas Tech, this is a young Oregon team. Okay, so you're going to be able to bait some mistakes out of that Oregon offense, I think, as a front seven if you're Texas Tech. At the end of the day, I'm going Oregon to win this game. And the reason I'm going Oregon to win this game, like we said, now last year there's a little bit of a misnomer to the whole all four top seeds lost last year. Yeah, but two of those top seeds was number 13 Arizona State and number 9 Boise State, who had buys and home games against the number 3 and number 4 teams in the country in Penn State and Texas. Right? Like the true favorites were Texas and Penn State. This, to me, this game profiles very similarly to those. Not to agree by any means. Texas Tech is a much better team than last year's Arizona State or last year's Boise State. But I still think the better team is the 5 seed Oregon team who got a tune-up game against JMU to just work out any kind of kinks. They knew who they were going to be playing the next week, so they got to do a little bit of scout work for what they're going to do against Texas Tech. They got to stay oiled and greased up for the game. I think at the end of the day, that works in Oregon's favor, and it's the difference in the game. Until I am proven wrong, I think the 5 seed is the most valuable seed in the college football playoff. You get a home game against what will almost always be a G5 team. Then you get to go play the number 4 team in the country, which more years than not is going to be an ACC and or Big 12 champion, and your 5 seed is going to be a top 3 Big 10 or SEC school. think that will just always favor the 5 seed. I just think
Yep.
it's a valuable spot. So give me Oregon to win the game.
So first off, I just want to say Texas Tech's done an amazing job this year getting to this point. Um, the coaching staff's done an awesome job. Now, obviously, they did go out and spend $1 billion in the portal building this team. So you better be good if you spend that kind of money, right? What was Saban's quote on game day? I don't care how much money you spend, you got to spend it on the right players. And Texas Tech has done that. They spent it on the right players. Their defense is very, very good. But who's the best quarterback Texas Tech's played this year? It's probably Sam Levitt, right? And guess who beat them? Sam Levitt. Scored 26 points. Now, you could tell me, yeah, like Texas Tech starting quarterback was out. Okay, fine. You still gave up 26 points to Sam Levitt in Arizona State, who's now transferring out of Arizona State. So this is by far the best offense that Texas Tech has played in Dante Moore in Oregon. Dan Lanning spent 365 days since last year preparing for this game because they got absolutely embarrassed last year in this game since they had all that time off. I trust Dan Lanning more in this situation. I think that Oregon's offense is legit, and I think Texas Tech's defense is legit. But I trust Oregon's defense more than I trust Texas Tech's offense. That's the problem. And now we'll say this, like, give credit where credit's due. Texas Tech has beaten every single opponent that they've played, minus Arizona State, by 21-plus points. That's ridiculous. So my question is, if this game is tight down the stretch and you got to have an offensive play, I don't know if they can do it. I haven't seen it. Oregon is battle-tested, right? They've been battle-tested. Now, granted, they lost against Indiana, but that's a tough game that you can learn a lot from. That game at Oregon or at Iowa is one of the better wins in the Big Ten, I would say. Like, that is not looked at as well as it should in such high regard. So they're more battle-tested than Texas Tech. I trust the coaching staff. I trust the offense and defense more. So give me Oregon to get the win. However, would I be surprised if Texas Tech pulls it off? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And quite frankly, if you ask me who I'm cheering for, I'm probably cheering for Texas Tech because it's a team that we don't see in this position often. So I'm picking Oregon to win, but I'm going to be cheering for Texas Tech. And then the final game is the Sugar Bowl. Now, to be honest, I don't really know how much we're going to talk about this one. Georgia is favored by 6.5 over Ole Miss. Obviously, Lane Kiffin's not there. It's Pete Golding at the helm in the Sugar Bowl as a rematch from earlier in the season. Looks like 94% of America has picked Georgia here. I guess I'll start with this one. I think Georgia's going to win the game, no problem. I think the fairy tale dust has settled from Ole Miss after their win against Tulane. Now, let me say this, though. In their first meeting, Ole Miss should have won that ball game, except for the fact that that was the turning point in the season for Georgia's defense. It wasn't just for this game. This game is what propelled Georgia to being the defense that we've known from Georgia. It was from the midway point of the third quarter on to the rest of the year that Georgia started playing some ball. And I think that they've got Ole Miss figured out. Trinidad Chambliss is one of the better, how do I say this? One of the more explosive quarterbacks in the playoffs remaining, I think. However, there's just a lot going on with Ole Miss, and Georgia's figured them out. And I think Georgia is playing the best football probably of any team in the playoffs minus Indiana. So I think Georgia's rolling in this one. I think they cover the 6.5. They probably win by like 11. I think it's close early in the first quarter, and then Georgia takes off because that defense is going to start smothering Ole Miss, and that's how it ends.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in on this real quick. I have issue with Ohio State at 9.5. I think that was a little high. Georgia 6.5 is too low.
Yeah.
This was the only game out of all 4 quarterfinals where I didn't even hesitate on who I'm picking. Like, at least with Ohio State, Miami, I was like, well, if Miami's pass rush gets after saying enough and Carson Beck plays the queen game, Miami could shock the world. Well, if Mendoza gets pressured a little bit and Ty Simpson just has one of those early or late September, early October Ty Simpson games where they're just converting every third down, Alabama could put the beat down on Indiana. And then, of course, Tech and Oregon, I basically flipped a coin to decide that game. But this one, this is not close. Okay. Like, I know you said Ole Miss should have won that game against Georgia. I don't really think so. I mean, you go back and watch the game, they just traded scores until the middle of the third quarter. And then Georgia's defense said, all right, you're not scoring anymore. And they just kept scoring and they ran away with the game. Right. And that's with Lane Kiffin. I hate to say this to the Ole Miss faithful because I know this has been the most magical, like 3 to 4 year run of football you've ever witnessed. You were good because of Lane Kiffin. You're Ole Miss. Plain and simple. You've had a magical run. It's been nice. You finally got to the playoff. And right as you did it, you got reminded where you sit in the hierarchy of the SEC because your coach went to LSU. Of all the places, he left you for LSU. That's rough. And now you got to go play one of those teams that lives in the penthouse of the SEC. That's Georgia. This Ole Miss defense is not good. Okay, so Gunnar Stockton, and I know Chase and I off camera had a little bit of a beef about this. In my opinion, I think Gunnar Stockton is the best quarterback played for Kirby.
No.
I started for Kirby. As far as being a difference maker for the team. Okay. And they're going to move the ball in this Ole Miss defense. I don't trust this Ole Miss defense at all. I've never trusted a Pete Golden defense whatsoever.
No.
All right. I don't like the way he calls defensive games. And then you've got an offense that's missing its secret sauce going against the Georgia team that was the hottest team of all of these teams coming into the playoff. This just feels like it's going to be an ugly finish. I think we're going to get 3 pretty good football games in the quarterfinal. Then we're going to get up to this one as the cap off for the quarterfinal, and it's just going to be a slaughter. Give me Georgia to win by anywhere from 14 to 24.
I think this is the game. Let me back up for a second. If Lane Kiffin was still here, I'd be beating the table that Ole Miss would upset and win this game. I said it back, and whenever they played in September or whatnot, they had the game for a while. I actually remember looking at that game. I was like, oh my gosh, Ole Miss is up by double digits. They're about to run away with this one. Heck yeah. Lane Kiffin, I'm right. I can shove it in Quinn and Freddie's face. Ole Miss, let's freaking go. I'm on it. This is Lane Kiffin's win. And then I checked it with 2 minutes left. I was like, man, Georgia's driving. This isn't good. How did they give up the double? What is going on? And then they lost the game. And then I was like, now I'm about to get it shoved in my face. Anywho, I think this is the game where the game ends. You log on to Twitter/X, whatever you prefer, and you see a bunch of Florida State fans going, "Hey, at college football playoffs, we lost our quarterback, didn't get in. They lost their head coach and got in. What do you think now?" Because I think this is going to be a piss poor showing by Ole Miss. You're going to see what happens when you don't have a elite head coach at the helm to play this. Pete Golding, without the off-field stuff, so please take that out of your head first, I think is a Sharon Moore type hire. I think he's just going to be collateral damage at the end of it in 2 to 3 years. I think he was just a good continuity hire to keep the people, most likely to keep a lot of players in-house so they don't jump ship to LSU as well, and that they can continue on through they made that permanent hire way too quick. And they did handle business against Tulane. I thought they did an exceptional job there because I thought Tulane might have a little more steam with John Summerall trying to coach it up a lot more. I thought it was going to be a lot better game than that. It wasn't. But I think this is going to be a lot of like what Georgia did last year. They're just going to walk you down. I think it'll look a lot better in the box score than it is, but I think Georgia walks them down, and I think it's like a 31 to like 17 type game, and I think it's like a late throwaway touchdown for Ole Miss in garbage time. But this is where I think Pete Golding gets really ripped open, and you can see, oh man, that's going to be our head coach for X number of years. Yikes. But Lane Kiffin was here, man. I really wish he was. But apparently, I don't know, Freddie, you told me this, or I heard this somewhere else, that Lane Kiffin is still like trying to help through offensive meetings because, like, if Ole Miss wins, like, he still gets money out of it. So maybe Lane Kiffin is still helping behind the scenes, maybe. But I don't know how much effect that's going to have.
You ain't got him on the side. Like Lane Kiffin
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
is he makes adjustments on the sideline like he's the quarterback reading the defense before the play.
Yeah.
He's the only coordinator I see doing stuff like that too. It's crazy. And you don't have that.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think it's gonna be a walk away. And the whole Gunnar Stockton thing, Quinn, I love you, but goodness gracious, there is a beautiful man named Stetson Bennett that graced the Georgia Bulldogs jersey, and he's been the best dang quarterback to ever come through Georgia. I swear. Now there is,
Saying Stetson Bennett's the best quarterback to come through Georgia is like me getting on here with my full chest and saying that Jake Coker is the best quarterback to play for Nick Saban.
you know what? You say your piece, I say mine.
Chase,
Georgia
I
fans,
don't know.
I'll let Georgia fans decide that one. Gunnar Stockton, Stetson Bennett, y'all let us know.
Chase, I don't know if you heard about whenever Pete Golding was at Alabama, but I don't know if that off the field stuff is fully on Sharon Moore and not Pete Golding. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. If you know, if you've been on Twitter and X when those things came out, you know. But guys, that has been the college football playoff quarterfinal preview and prediction for 3 Bowl Takes. I'm joined by Chase and Quinn. I am Freddie, and we will see you guys in the next one.